It's time to bring you yet another amazing episode. And now, welcome your host.
This is the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest, personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
Hello, once again, this is Omobola Stephen, the host of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. On the show, we like to focus on disruptive mindship conversations, yet constructive in nature, on topics or subjects covering society and culture, science and technology, government and politics, and also the economy. We realize that all of the changes that we need in life can only come if we're ready to embrace the changes that life offers to us. Though it may be inconvenient, it may be uncomfortable, but when we focus on what is truly important and also embrace these changes that comes along, I guarantee you that we are really truly going to have a transformed life and also in the world in general. This is the mission and the focus of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. We like to shine more light on what has not worked and what will make it work. Today, I have Jack Decker, who is the author of the state's first amendment on the Backstory with me. Welcome to the show, Jack Decker.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me on the show, Jack Decker. I'm looking forward to a really great time. We'll be talking about the state's first amendment, and that's the core of our discussion today. Why are you an advocate of the state's first amendment?
Because in the United States of America, we have federal government, state governments, and there's a lot of duplication of government services at the federal level that's already done at the state level. And this duplication of services adds a level of complexity and wasted effort on both ends. I think that state governments are better able to handle a lot of the problems because they're closer to the problem than the federal government is. The federal government is in Washington, D.C., and we have states in Alaska and Hawaii and other places. I believe the state governments are better able to address the problems and the needs of their states that the one-size-fits-all approach of the federal government just is not suited to do. And I believe if this amendment would reduce the amount of duplication, thus saving taxpayer money and effort and time and energy by both citizens and businesses in those states. So it does that by basically creating a new politician in a way. It makes, right now in the United States of America, we have federal politicians and they can only influence the nation by passing federal laws, state politicians that can only influence their state by state laws. I create a hybrid where it's a politician that's both a federal politician and a state politician. They can vote on federal laws, introduce federal laws, and introduce and vote on state laws. And this, I believe, gives them an advantageous position where they can think what would be best handled at the federal level and what would be best handled at the state level. And there's a lot of duplication between that the federal government does of the state levels, but that's simply because federal politicians can only pass federal laws. And so they want to influence like education, they have to pass a federal law about education. Well, with my amendment, it creates a politician that's both a federal politician and a state politician, so they can decide, is this, like for the education law, is this better handled at the federal level or is this better handled at the state level? I believe that the majority of the laws that they can will be done at the state level. If they can be done at the state level, I think the states will want to do it at the state levels. This does not eliminate the federal government because there's certain things that are best done at the federal government, like national defense. We have a department called the State Department, which is actually misleading. It's actually our diplomacy department, international diplomacy. The State Department the ambassadors are from the State Department. And there's the Treasury, which prints the national currency. And I think these three functions are best done at the federal level, and I think the states will agree that's best done at the federal level. But there's our federal departments like Federal Department of Education, Interior, which is our state parks, transportation, our highway system, et cetera. That I believe is better handled at the state level, because there's the United States is a very large country. We have every type of terrain, climate, except for Arctic in our country. We have down in Florida, we have swamps. And on the West Coast, we have oceans and coastlines. In Florida, we have hurricanes. On the West Coast, we have earthquakes. In the Midwest, we have blizzards and tornadoes. And I think the federal government's approach of one size fits all doesn't adequately service all these very different climates as well as different industries. We have a Mississippi, which is a major transportation line, but that's only for those states that are connected to the Mississippi. There are states that are the West Coast and East Coast are not connected to the Mississippi. They have the oceans that they use for their transportation and smaller rivers. And then there's issues such like industries. There's certain industries like in the Midwest is heavily agriculture because we have the plains of the Midwest, which are very fertile land because of the Mississippi. It floods and the flooding of it creates nutrient-rich soils for them. But there's also like San Francisco is our tech capital, where we have high tech. Your viewers might know like Google, Microsoft, Twitter are all based in California, in San Francisco area. And then there's other like our business center is New York City, which is on the East Coast. And this is where major corporations are. Your viewers might know like General Motors, all the broadcast networks are headquartered in New York City. So I believe because we're such a varied nation, that the federal government's one size fits all can't adequately service the country. So I think it's best for the states to do that.
I'd like us to talk about the amendment, the First Amendment. What does it consist of?
States' First Amendment, you want me to go through the issue of the sections?
Yes, I'd like us to talk about what it consists of, because this is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on the State's First Amendment, and you are an advocate of this State's First Amendment. I would like us to talk a bit about what it consists of. We would like to address it.
Sure. Section 1 and 2 talks about the creation of this hybrid politician I talked about, which is both a federal politician and a state politician. And the Section 1 is each state gets one vote in the U.S. Senate. That vote goes to the state's current governor. Current governor can serve as the U.S. vice president, and governors cannot be compensated any way or form to their service to the U.S. Senate or the office of the U.S. vice president. Section 2 is each state's votes in the U.S. House of Representatives is equally divided amongst all the state's current state assembly members. Each current state assembly member is a full member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and none of them can be compensated in any way or form for their service to the U.S. House of Representatives. What this does is it brings the U.S. federal government into the 21st century. What we're doing right now, what you and I are doing right now, was not possible when my country was founded in 1776. Back then, the fastest mode of communication was by horse or ship, and the roads had to be you had to be able to travel across the roads if they were too muddy, if the weather went bad, or with ships if there was bad weather at sea. It would influence how fast communication could happen. So back in 1776, all the U.S. House, the federal government had to meet in Washington, D.C. to be able to effectively and smoothly communicate with each other. But today, like what we are doing right now, the video conferencing is possible. So all of these U.S. houses, the U.S. senators and U.S. House of Representatives can be back in their states and their districts and communicate by way of video conferencing as we're doing right now. You can watch online a lot of the committees and subcommittees actually do their business by watching it on video conferencing, a live video. And I think that is a better way of doing it, gets the U.S. senators and U.S. House of Representatives back among the people that elected them, gets them out of Washington, D.C., which is where a lot of lobbyists are able to influence, a lot of Americans say negatively, legislation. We call it, those that really don't like Washington, D.C., call it the swamp, like as in alligators and snakes and et cetera, rather a negative view of it. Well, this essentially eliminates the swamp by removing the senators and U.S. House of Representatives from them, puts them back in their areas. Now, my feeling is that once the U.S. senators, there are two in every state gets two in the U.S. House of the U.S. Senate. Once you put them back into their states, well, kind of like, what are they there for then? I believe the governors, the state governors represent their states. In fact, I don't know in the history of the United States of any governor that did not view him or herself representing their state. If you ask any state resident who represents your state, they will say their governor. So I think we can just eliminate, since the U.S. senators are already kind of back in their states, I think we can just give their votes to the governors and have them represent their states in the U.S. Senate. So there are 50 governors, there are 100 U.S. senators, so we just basically go from 2 votes of every state to 1 vote of every state, so that the U.S. Senate is now 50 votes as opposed to 100. And then the same thing is with the House of Representatives, sending them back to their states. Well, there's in every state has its state assembly members, kind of like the U.S. House of Representative at the U.S. House of Representatives at the state level is called a state assembly. I believe we took just the votes that those states get in U.S. House of Representative and divide amongst the state assembly members, we can get rid of employing a separate body of politicians, the state U.S. House of Representatives, and just have those votes go to the state assembly members. And that way, now I create the hybrid politician I talked about, which is one that is both a federal politician and a state politician, by just eliminating the current U.S. House of Representatives and the current U.S. senators. Their positions are not eliminated, but they're just transferred. The state senators' positions are transferred to the state governor. The U.S. House of Representatives position is transferred to the state assembly members. And then in Section 3, which is all U.S. senators can propose and vote on legislative bills from their state. All U.S. House of Representatives can propose and vote on legislative bills from their district and state capital. And all congressional committees and subcommittee meetings must be conducted by way of video conferencing. That's just a parliamentary rule section talking about how these now hybrid politicians can propose and vote on legislative bills. In our country, there's very famous historical events where you have to vote. Right now, you have to be on the floor of the U.S. Senate to propose bills and vote on. You have to be in the U.S. House of Representatives, the floor of it, the physical floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, to vote and to propose and vote on bills in the state legislature and U.S. House of Representatives. This is Section 3 just enables them to do that from their home state. So this creates the hybrid politician I talk about. And I think this will result with, I think a very fast, but with some cases gradual change in the federal government, is where these hybrid politicians will decide what should be done at the federal level, what should be done at the state level. And then I think a lot of this is, I don't think they're ever going to eliminate any state department, but I think they'll eliminate almost all federal departments that duplicate what they're doing currently at the state level. So again, like I said before, I think of all the federal departments, I think there will eventually only be three, which is the Defense Department, which is our national defense, the State Department, which is our international diplomacy, and the Treasury Department, which is what prints our national currency, the US dollar. That's the cornerstone of the amendment is this change. I can talk about the other sections of how it makes other little changes that makes that even better if you like. You would like me to? Okay. Section 4 says the U.S. President must physically visit every state in the union and U.S. territory at least once a year. Our first president of the United States was George Washington. He was actually, before he was the president of the United States, he was the general of the Revolutionary Army that got us that won our independence from the British Empire. He became our first president, and he felt it was very important for the people that he represented to see him. So there was only 13 states at that time. He personally went to each of those states so that the local population could see who is governing them. He thought that was very important. The next president to visit all states was Richard Nixon, which was a recent president. I think it's very important that the president goes and visits every state, so the states have a chance to make the president aware of their conditions, and the local populations can see him. He has a chance to interact with the governors and the state assembly members there. There are 50 states in the United States of America. There are 52 weeks in the year. I believe each state will demand that the president spends 1 week a year in their state. And that way, then they have the attention of not only the president, but the national press, the nation will pay attention to their state for 1 week a year. And I think that's a really good thing. And because all the governors are actually also U.S. senators, and the state assembly members are also U.S. House of Representatives, the president has a very big incentive to talk to them, because they will be voting on federal legislation that he will either veto or pass, or pocket veto is called. So he's not going to be treating these governors and state assembly members in a bad way, because he needs their votes to pass any legislation he wants to pass, such as like the national budget. And I think also the U.S. territories should see the president. They won't get a week, but when the U.S. president is over in Hawaii, he can, the U.S. president flies in what we call Air Force One, which is a 747 jumbo jet. And on that jet, he actually has, I think it's a king-size bed that he can actually sleep in like you would in a hotel. He can actually sleep on the jet. And so he could go from Hawaii, they'll get their week. And then there's a lot of little territories we have around in the Pacific area. He could fly to them, sleeping overnight, and then spend a day or two in each of the U territories like Guam and other states, islands there. And he can do likewise when he's over and visits on the East Coast, like Hawaii, Florida, not Hawaii, in Florida.
Absolutely.
He could fly over and visit Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands for a day or two. I think Puerto Rico would get at least 2 days. The U.S. Virgin Islands might get 1 day. But he has 2 weeks to visit all the U.S. territories. And I think that'd be a very good thing. But that enables then Section 5. You want me to go into that? Of course,
sure. For sharing these sections and subsections with my audience, don't you think let's set objectives that you have on your table as an advocate of the State Sports Amendment? Don't you think they are very challenging enough?
Challenging enough for who? For
yeah, I'm talking as you are an advocate of the State Sports Amendment, and now you've read the sections and some of the subsections of this amendment. And now, don't you think they pose some kind of challenges on the way? How do you hope to achieve all of these objectives in the long run?
To actually make this become reality, I think it is possible because in the United States, we have a U.S. Constitution. In the U.S. Constitution, we have a section of it that enables the states to have what's called constitutional convention. The states can call a constitutional convention without asking for permission from the U.S. president or Congress. And they can call this and make amendments to the Constitution without totally independent of the president and Congress. This amendment here, the way I put it is, I'm not playing to the politicians' good nature to make this amendment pass. I'm playing to their bad nature. All politicians want more power. And I believe this gives the state politicians more political power. It gives the governors, see, right now the states are kind of subservient to the federal government. The federal government can does something, pass a law, and the states have to basically react to it. The federal government laws supersede state laws, and so they're in a subservient position to the federal government. My amendment enables the state politicians to directly impact the federal government. They're the ones that are going to be passing the laws and voting on the laws, and it gives them more power. Thus, it gives them more. I believe that gives them the incentive to pass this amendment, because all politicians like more power. The joke is never stand between a politician and more power. They'll just run right over you. So this gives them an incentive to pass this amendment. I think that is the real reason why this might actually get passed, is because it gives the state politicians more power, and they have the ability, because of how our Constitution is written, to call a constitutional convention and pass this legislation without the president or the Congress having any input. But I actually think in this aspect that the U.S. senators will want this amendment as well. Again, don't stand between a politician and more power. U.S. senators had to win statewide elections to become a U.S. senator, just like a governor had to win a statewide election to be a governor. To a U.S. senator, here's an opportunity for him to literally double the power he has or she has in the U.S. Senate and get the power of the state governorship. And so all politicians have massive egos. You can't be a politician without a massive ego, because of, just think of the mud that is thrown at them during campaigns and the scrutiny that they are under. If you didn't have a massive healthy ego, you'd be just crushed by running for office. And so I think they all will think, I can win the governorship. So when they look at this amendment going, while it does kick them out of their office, it fires them. Well, but it gives them, I can go for the governorship. And thus, by winning the governorship, I are in the U.S. Senate, and I could actually see them whenever they meet. They don't meet all the time, but when they're in session, they could meet still in Washington, D.C., but I have a feeling that what they would do is every time they meet in session, they'll meet in a different state. Each state has a state Supreme Court, and I believe when the U.S. Supreme Court comes to their state, the state Supreme Court will make a nice gesture and vacate their court room, so the U.S. Supreme Court can come in and sit there while they're in session, and then it'd be a nice way for them to, again, do a little good PR for the U.S. Supreme Court. But this basically...
Then, Jack, let's look at the ongoing challenge to define free speech. Sure. We like to talk about the ongoing challenge to define free speech, as we all know that this amendment protects freedom of speech. I'm talking about the state's First Amendment. It protects the freedom of speech, the press, the assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, I would like you to share your perspective on the ongoing challenges to define free speech at this moment.
I'm very happy with the current status of free speech in America. We have we have a constitutional right in our country to freedom of speech. And we have an independent judiciary that protects that right. I think all the other countries in the world have a parliamentary form of government. The United Kingdom has a parliamentary form of government. France has a parliamentary form of government is the norm worldwide. The problem with the parliamentary form of government is that they don't have an independent judicial branch, because all the power, all the political power is in the parliament, and the parliament wants that power. And if a country's Supreme Court rules against something that the parliament passed, the parliament can just change. They can just fire everyone in their Supreme Court. They could just make another law to pass it. The U.S. Constitution, the federal government, the U.S. Supreme Court protects that. And they have routinely throughout our history struck down laws at the federal level, state level, local level that has violated the freedom of speech. This is a great thing about I think it's the only country in the world that has a true independent judiciary branch. The way I'm a libertarian, libertarians are for a good way of putting what a libertarian is we're fiscally respectful, socially tolerant. Another way of putting it is we want more liberty, less government. The First Amendment is very important. The First Amendment basically is about speech that you find disgusting. Okay, it protects disgusting speech. It's not about First Amendment doesn't protect speech you agree with. First Amendment protects speech you disagree with, and without that, all views cannot be expressed. Those in power, in some countries, they have what's called hate laws. And in the United States, we have no hate laws. Once you allow certain speech to be outlawed, it's kind of a slippery slope from that point. Well, then how about this speech? And you start just outlawing. In the United Kingdom, you can literally be arrested for a tweet. You can put out a tweet, and the police will come and arrest you. And here in America, when I tell that to Americans, many of them don't believe that would even happen. They're just astounded that you could be arrested for a tweet. But that's what actually has happened, and even for just a joke. So I'm very happy with the U.S. First Amendment. It's not perfect, but I think it's the best in the world right now for protecting the freedom of speech. There's also in the First Amendment, there's a freedom of the press, which enables the press to not be censored by the federal government, even though we've had recently cases where the Biden administration has tried to censor speech on social platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Google and YouTube, and that's very unfortunate. Fortunately, again, our court system has come in and routinely struck down, has prohibited the executive branch, President Biden currently, from doing that. And that's a very good thing for our country as far as freedom of speech, freedom of press goes. We also have freedom of religion. There's no state religion in our country, and there's also freedom of assembly. Basically the right to go out and protest. In our country, it has to be peaceful. You can't have a violent protest. As long as you're peaceful, you can go out and protest anything you want. That recently, again, has been a problem because we just recently had a court decision that where the police were arresting protesters of one side of a political issue and not the other side. And the judge said, you can't do that. If you arrest the political protesters that are advocating one position, you can't do that and not arrest the protesters of the other position at that event that are just being as violent, if not more violent. And so that's just a recent, like I think last week that decision came down. The judge threw out all the arrests that the police had made because they only arrested one side that was protesting, and they didn't arrest anyone on the other side. So I think that's a great thing about this country. The courts
Thanks
are protecting.
so much, Jack Jacob. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the show. Talking about the State's First Amendment. Jack Jacob is the author of the State's First Amendment. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts. Do you have any exciting news that you would like to share with my audience? Perhaps you have any projects in the pipeline that's very interesting to my audience.
Oh, I mean, like what they can do to follow this further? Is that if they would like to?
My audience would like to know if you have any exciting news you would like to share with them, or perhaps you have any project in the pipeline that is a great fit for my audience to learn about.
Yeah, well, right now there's if they would like to follow what I'm doing right now, if they went to Twitter and they follow my account on Twitter, which is the @Jack T. Decker, that's about the only thing that right now they can do. And I post if you send me a link to when this interview goes live, I'll tweet out the link to all my Twitter followers, and so they can watch or listen to this program as well. So that's something that they could do if they wanted to. This is the only project I'm working on right now.
Thanks so much for that. Any projects you embark upon? I and my audience wish you the best in all of that.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.